for joining us today. My name is Ian Scott, and I am the managing partner at Scott Legal. And today we're going to talk about the EB-5 visa and the EB-5 visa in the context of direct investment as well as regional centers. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. We will record this presentation and we will send you a recording after the presentation. And also, we'll send you a number of other things. We'll send you a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, a copy of the EB-5 visa guide, and also information on how you could set up a consultation if you have additional questions. Scott Legal is a full-service immigration law firm that focuses on investor-based visas like EB-5. A lot of our clients, some of them have E2 visas and they move to EB-5s, others other visa types or maybe no visa type and use EB-5. And as I said, we will be going through both the direct investment and the regional center. If you have any questions, definitely add them to the chat function. We will get to all questions. And without further ado, we will move into the presentation. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the difference between a regional center and direct investment. So here, let's just use an example. The regional center might be a situation where, let's say, a hotel chain wants to raise capital because they want to build a hotel and they utilize the EB-5 program to do that. So an individual will invest money with that hotel chain and the hotel will use it to build the hotel, to hire employees, et cetera. So this investor profile is one where the investor is fairly passive, really doesn't want the risk of having to run a business or operate the business, wants to just put the money in, doesn't want to hire employees. They also are not concerned about the return on the investment. They typically, the return on these types of investments is typically a negative return, where they have to pay a large or significant management fee, sometimes $50,000 or sometimes even more than that. And someone else is going to be managing the money, but that is what the individual wants because they're looking for much more passive investment. And the other direct investment might be somebody, let's say someone who wants to start a gym, open up a gym in a location, and they want control over their investment. They want to be the one that is hiring the employees. They want to be the one in charge of making sure that they're getting a return on the investment. So really, they want to be the person really fully in control. So the profiles of these two types of investors are very different. The program is similar. There are some differences between the two programs, but they are similar. But that is the risk profile or the profile of the individuals. So during the presentation, we're going to talk about the two key requirements, one being investment, the other being job creation. And then we're also going to talk about how it is you file an EB-5 petition. So the first requirement has to do with the investment. So when you're doing an EB-5 petition, you are required to invest either 800,000 or 1,050,000 in a new commercial enterprise. So that doesn't mean a brand new enterprise. That could be an enterprise that was developed after 1990. So that's either investing in a business that already exists. So you invest and the money goes in the business and is used to create jobs, or you could start a business. Either of those two could work, or you could invest in a regional center. Now, the difference between these two options is the 800,000 versus the 1,050,000 is that the lower amount relates to an investment in what's called a targeted employment area. And that's going to be an area where the unemployment rate is at least 1.5 times the national average, or an area that is a rural area defined by statute. So that if you in the $800,000 range, then it's going to be TEA, and then everything else is going to be the higher amount. And this becomes really important given the visa backlogs that we're going to talk about in a little bit. You have to, they're very strict with respect to what can be, which investment, what type of investment can be included. The investment, for example, it can't include accounting fees or legal fees or anything like that. The money has to be used to create jobs. And also the investment can be made over time. And what that means is that all of the investment has to be made before you file. However, when I say over time, you could have $100,000 made one year, another 100,000 in another year until you got up to the 800,000. Once you got up to 800,000, you can file the petition, but you don't have to make the investment all at once. And the investment does have to be investment in the sense of investment that is not retained earnings. So retained earnings, you can't, for example, let's say you had an E2 entity and the entity made $1.5 million dollars, and then you had 400,000 in expenses, so you were left with 1.1 million, and then you that was in retained earnings, and then you spent that the next year. That wouldn't count for your EB-5 investment because that's just retained earnings in the company. The money has to be money that you possess, have control and possession of outside the company, and then invested in the company. The E2 and EB-5 are very, very different. The EB-5 and E2 both have a source of funds analysis, but the EB-5 is much more like an audit. So the analysis is much more extensive, and the investment does have to be an equity investment rather than a loan. So it can't be, it can't be a loan, and but it could be a limited partnership unit, it could be a membership unit, it could be a share. So anything like that. So that's a little bit about the investment. And as I said, it could be that if someone's investing in a regional center. It could be that someone is investing in their own business. If someone was doing the gym, then they would, put the money in a bank account, then they use the money to buy gym equipment, to pay staff, to pay lease equipment, maybe refurbish the gym, whatever is required to get the business up and running. So the second big element of EB-5 relates to job creation. And what this means is that the entity has to create at least 10 full-time jobs. Now, if it's a regional center, then the regional center is going to be creating the 10 full-time jobs, and the regional center can include indirect employees as well. So this would be a situation if there was a hotel, and then down the street there was a restaurant that opened or a dry cleaner, and those two establishments had jobs. An economist can make a report that would impute and say that because this hotel is here, then the jobs have actually been created. Indirect jobs have actually been created. If it's a direct investment, the gym example, then the jobs would have to be 10 full-time jobs, and that means not a part-time job, full-time. There is a concept of a shared job, but we recommend not using that because it's very difficult to document. And then the jobs have to be green card holders or US citizens. So it's very important to register for something called like E-Verify or something like that so that you're sure that the people actually do have work authorization. You are going to have often a detailed business plan. If it's whether it's a direct investment or a regional center, there's going to be a business plan. And one thing about the investment, as I said, the investment does have to be linked to job creation. So that's why EB-5 doesn't really work for buying a company. Like, let's say you're buying a company and giving the money directly to the seller, then EB-5 may not be an option for you because that money couldn't count towards the investment. The filing now, how do you file an EB-5 petition? So the filing really, it's a number of different petitions that have to be filed. The first is going to be an I-526 or I-526E, depending on whether it's a regional center or direct investment. And once that is filed, then you're going to file a I-485 form if you're in the United States, as long as the priority date is current, or if not, after the I-526 is approved, you're going to do consular processing. Then 2 years after you have the green card, you'd file an I-829, and that is a form that is filed to remove the conditions. Because what happens is you get the green card, but it's conditional and on creating the U.S. jobs. And then you have to create the US jobs. And once you've created them, you show the government that you've created them, and then they remove those conditions and give you the green card for 10 years. A few things to keep in mind, and this is in particular because this date, September 30th, 2026 date is coming up. The program changed in 2022. The investment amount was increased. And the key here is that this particular program, the Regional Center program, does require reauthorization every once in a while. So this program has to be reauthorized again in September 30th, 2027. But the documents actually indicate that the government will adjudicate your petition as long as it's filed before September 30th, 2026. And that's a key date because A, it's coming up this year, but B, a lot of people were left in limbo the last time that the program had to be reauthorized. But this date makes it such that people won't be kept in limbo because they will know that if they file before the September 30th, 2026 date, that their project will be their application rather will be adjudicated. Now, this only relates to regional centers. The direct investment program does not require reauthorization, so that date only applies to regional centers. The government also changed the TEA rules. They made it harder to be a TEA, so they're only the only ones who can designate the TEA designation now. And then the other piece that is a big change, and this is really does impact a lot of people, is that there's a set aside 20% for rural, 10% for high unemployment, which is 1.5 times the national average, and 2% for infrastructure projects. And what this means is that as of right now, all of the categories are current for all countries. So this could be a significant impact if the applicant was from a country that had significant delays, like China, for example, where a Chinese investor who invests in either a rural area, high unemployment, or infrastructure project, and this could be direct or regional center, would get the benefit of being able to apply and not have any delay. The other big change was the I-485 can be filed concurrently. And the another big change, the ability to file for work authorization and travel authorization if you can do the I-485 filing. And that really gives you the benefit of being in the position to live and work in the United States, even while the adjudication of your petition is pending. And that could be 4 or 5 years that this adjudication is pending. So that is a significant benefit. The government also clarified that administrative fees, the money can't be used towards administrative fees, the investment funds, and you also have to provide source of funds for those administrative fees. And then there were some other changes that allowed for getting out of regional centers in certain conditions. Some other things to consider, if you're doing a direct investment in particular, you can't just take the money and put it in a bank account and have it sit there. You do have to, it's not just the intent to invest, it really is you have to show that you're investing. So you would actually have to spend money and then perhaps have commitments for others. So commitment could be something to refurbish the site in the gym example that I used. Commitment could be employee. So there are lots of different options for that. Loans and gifts, they've always been fine, but you do have to show where the loan is coming from or where the gift is coming from. So if you get the gift from your parents, for example, you would have to actually show that where your parents got the money from. I talked about this already, the considerations for purchasing a business. So you can't get an EB-5 with you just buying a business and giving the money to the seller. And the reason is because the government feels that that money isn't going towards job creation. It's just going to the seller, and the seller can use it to do whatever they want. There's no requirement related to how much you own. It can be a fraction of a percentage, unlike E2 where you have to own 50%. And you can't have any guaranteed return of the investment. So that's something that is important. The corporate documents can't indicate that. And if you're moving from E2 to EB-5, you have to do this very carefully, and you really have to sit down with a qualified immigration attorney to see what can be counted towards the investment and what cannot. So the other considerations that we can talk about is timing. The EB-5 petition takes many, many years to be approved. It could be 4 to 5 years to be approved unless the project is in a rural area. And so you do have to kind of look at that in the context of which visa type do you have, and are you able to continue working on that visa type, and are you going to need any particular visa to be able to continue working in the United States? We do have lots of clients who are on what are called non-immigrant visas with single intent. So someone on a TN, for example. So you do have to look at that and make sure that you are planning carefully. A lot of people do have parallel green card strategies. We have, given the length of time the EB-5 program takes, we have people who, in the EB-5 program, but then they meet and marry a US citizen, and then they instead decide to get the green card that way. And planning really is key. So those were all of the planned remarks that I have, and we do have time for questions to the extent that anybody has any questions. And if you put them in the chat function or the Q&A function, we can definitely answer those questions. We do recommend that you set up a consultation to kind of go through your specific fact pattern. The biggest part of an EB-5 program, or a significant part of an EB-5 case, is the source of funds. So getting that organized is something that in the forefront is something that is very important. So that's something to do. As I said, we will send you a copy of the PowerPoint. We will send you a copy of the video and a guide. I've just taken a look again, and I don't see any questions. So we will end it there. And thank you very much for joining.